Hey, 32, female for male, looking for several people to control Lush 3 during D&D. I'm about to have 2 back-to-back D&D sessions, so 6 hours of D&D, looking to have several people take turns with my toy, text only. DM me with subject line, Lush 3, include age, omit honorifics. I'm just imagining them taking down their BBEG, and then all of a sudden she's just like, Yes! Wow, Natasha, you're really getting into this game. My name is Jacob Crowe, and welcome to the Crow's Perch. Before we begin today's video, I would like to thank our sponsor, Apotheosis. Ever wanted to play a TTRPG where using your skills makes you better at them? Want dozens of character options and abilities to choose from, instead of taking Great Weapon Master for the 50th time? Want to finally tell your DM that you want to play as a neurological parasite, and that it's actually one of the base ancestries of the game? Then get ready for Apotheosis, a new upcoming tabletop role-playing game, with an emphasis on dynamic character progression. Level up your ability scores as you use them, unlocking new abilities tied to each of the game's 5 ability scores. Want to cast spells? Try flexing your mental muscle and start making some intelligence checks to discover hidden lore, instead of just spamming your starting heal spell over and over like in Skyrim. So it's pretty easy to pick up for any 5th edition player looking for a new game, without feeling like they have to throw out all of their Hero Forge minis. I personally love the plethora of talents. Each of them really adds something to your character, while still being noob-friendly enough for players who find the character creation of games like Pathfinder to be a bit too daunting. Yeah, let's never look at those Starfinder mech rules again. If I need a graphing calculator to calculate my AC, then yeah, I wouldn't be touching those rules even if I had a 10-foot pole. The rulebook is planned to be sold for $15 for the PDF, or $30 for the physical copy, $25 before shipping. And that rulebook comes with everything that someone needs to start playing the game. Character creation, monsters, magic items, GM notes, and more. So be sure to support the Apotheosis game on Kickstarter by following the link down below, as well as checking out their Discord and Twitter. The devs have also promised a Crow's Perch themed NPC and magic item. So if you've ever hated any of my RPG takes, you can just kill me in game. Or if you're feeling a bit more charitable, you could abduct me and add me as your party mascot. To get the stat block, simply send a message to the Apotheosis Twitter or Facebook with the message Crow's Perch. Thank you to Apotheosis for sponsoring this video. And with all that out of the way, let's get started. Today we're going to be going through a series of stories. In our first story, a DM NPC gets made fun of and blasts a player character by May123. So, without further ado, let's finish writing our totally not edgy OC's anime protagonist backstory and gather up a murder and dive right into this story. So, figured I'd do another of these, as I got heaps, and it's kinda like an Am I the Asshole post. Characters aren't really important, so we'll just use class to refer to them if I need to. So, campaign is going. I've joined halfway through at level 7. First thing to note is there is heaps of homebrew, and less of the cool homebrew and more of the because I said so homebrew. Anyway, play for a bit, lose my first character, my fault, and I turn down being revived by death. As this happens so often, as a plot point in these campaigns, I now turn down any revives except from players. So, what I learned with my first character is don't try to contribute to the plot. If the DM has chosen the PC, who is the main character, and deviation from that storyline is basically impossible, or will lead back to it. Knowing this, I bring in my Dwarven Cleric, classic Dwarven warrior character, and generic backstory involving a dragon. And I'm good to go. Honestly, not too fussed about playing, but more interested in hanging out with friends. So I just buff. Some sessions go by, and we have a huge session. Funeral and a boss battle with BBEG that the party has been chasing for some time. Next session, We all just want to rest and regroup. Arrive at tavern, and start chatting/planning. I go to bring up a bit of a secret topic, so I decide to check for eavesdroppers, and sure enough, we got a hooded fella at another table kind of listening in. Possessing no tact, I ask him loudly if he wouldn't mind minding his own business, to which I hear a voice in my head that the DM tells me I recognize as having mildly influenced my thoughts before, telling me to calm down by name. I'm not pleased, so I animate his chair to walk him over to our table and ask him about his deal. You see unnatural shadows under his hood, making his features foggy. That. Dispel magic on the illusion. Remember this dispel, as it will be relevant. So now we have a scarred elf in front of us. I cast detect magic to make sure nothing else is going on. Get told he is teeming with necromancy and has a powerful enchantment on his weapon. I ask what the weapon is, and get told I can't see a weapon on him. I point out that he just said I can see a weapon. And this goes back and forward, till I give up and we move on. Remember, this detect magic is running the whole time. So we start questioning him, and learn a few things through some very self-important dialogue. We learn that he is named White Death, not called, but named. He has lived for 15,000 years? I mean, at least he doesn't look like he's 13, right? He's the world's greatest bounty hunter. He knows the entire party by name, and can speak every language. I'm actually not sure there was anything he didn't know. So we ask him what he wants, and he tells us that he knows we are going after a bounty. I picked up this bounty 3 sessions ago, and talked about it once, but we aren't strong enough. So he proposes we play bait, and he kills the target for equal share. It is at this point I recognize some similarities between the White Death and a PC. The DM plays in another campaign called Winter, so I start to poke fun. I begin by asking how we actually know he is what he says he is. So far all we know about him is he's shit at eavesdropping. So he throws me his business card, and I write my name on a napkin and throw it back at him, asking what does that prove? This goes on for a bit, with some of the other party members joining in, except the ranger who actually liked him. The White Death keeps bragging about how he never misses, and we ask if that's because he doesn't claim to know what he's aiming at until after. At this point I realize that my character wouldn't be this harsh, so I tell the White Death that I'm sorry. He pissed me off by eavesdropping, so if he apologizes for that, we can start fresh, to which he responds, never. The ranger eventually breaks through the restarted mocking to convince us to think it over during the night. The White Death agrees and leaves. I say, hell no, we got more questions, and try to place him gently back in his seat, to which I'm told my hand goes through him. He was an illusion the whole time. Remember the dispel magic? Remember the detect magic? When I question this, the DM just smiles and says they appeared to have no effect. SMH. We all go to bed, except the ranger who decided to do some last-second potion shopping. While out and about, the DM asks if some ridiculous number like 32 hits, and the ranger is like, yeah, of course. 72 points of damage, and because of a feature, the ranger is down, because it did over 50% hit points and damage, at which point all we hear is, I never miss, in our heads, and are awoken. The session ends there, and no one is happy. We just kinda leave, and the game goes on hiatus for 4 weeks, cause the DM knows they just threw a tantrum, and is trying to find a way to fix it, without admitting he threw a tantrum, because we made fun of his character. We did get back to it and the session to fix it. Made no one happy again, but there was really no way to. TLDR, we make fun of DM self-insert, and he throws a tantrum, and kills a PC. Oh boy. Another edgy DMPC. But seriously, I can kinda sympathize with this one. I too have made a character I thought would be this total badass that the party would love. He showed up out of nowhere, chasing down a vicious raptor creature, which pounced onto the PCs as he came to save them. Then he missed his attack rolls for 2 turns in a row, and the creature ran away. The party was immediately making fun of him, and I just thought, oh shit. And then he just awkwardly storms off after, and that made it even worse. I made this badass look like a fucking idiot. My point though, you can't decide how your players will feel about your NPCs. They make that decision when they reach the table. They'll like who they like, and you can't change that. So you have to be flexible. Knight Captain Roderick McYeetly, who you wrote a 10-page backstory for, might just die in a mining collapse orchestrated by your players. While Craggletooth, the goblin dog missing an ear who bathes in slime, ends up becoming propped up as the party mascot. Always be sure to let your characters breathe, and don't make them so essential that the story can't move on without them. Take some notes from Fallout New Vegas, where it's still possible to beat the game, even if you kill every NPC in the game. And with that, we move on to the next story. So, since we mentioned Pathfinder earlier, I thought it could be fun to go into a Pathfinder story. This story is about how a GM rage quit after encountering a spell he definitely wasn't ready for. And so, without further ado, let's spend the next 6 months in character creation and gather up a murder, and dive right into this second story. I made this post on the Pathfinder forum yesterday, and some folks said I should share it here as well. I've never read this forum before, but it's great to see that there's a good place to vent, because my story feels like it would fit perfectly here. I was in a game where I thought the DM was knowledgeable and experienced. He seemed pretty confident, and overall ran a pretty tight game. We were in book 3 or 4 of one of the official campaigns, and managed to sneak up on some sort of secret meeting of bad guys doing bad guy things. We were on a cliff, overlooking it or something. I don't really remember the details. Anyway, we had just reached level 9, and I was playing a wizard, which means level 5 spells. I hadn't gotten the chance to use any yet, but I have played games to 16 to 19, and have plenty of experience with high-level magic play. Anyone who knows Magic Jar really well would know that this meeting would be a prime opportunity to cause some chaos and really put the spell to use. To give context, since this forum seems to be highly centered around 5th edition, here's what the spell does. Too long. Okay, give me 1 second, let me break this down. So by casting the spell, you place your soul in a gem or large crystal, leaving your body lifeless. Then you can attempt to take control of a nearby body. Its soul into the magic jar. You may move back to the jar. Thereby returning the to cast the spell, the magic jar must be within spell range, and you must know where it is. While within the magic jar, when you transfer your soul upon casting, within 10 feet per caster level, the creature's soul into the magic attempting to possess a body is a full round action. It is blocked by protection from evil, or a similar ward. Okay. You put your soul in a jar. From the jar, you can hop into other people's bodies, but only if they have a soul. Then you put their soul in the jar. See that, Pathfinder? You could make it a 2-sentence f***ing spell description. Yeah, stay mad, Pathfinder nerds. Unless you donate to my Patreon, in which case, you're totally right and I'm so wrong. It is very powerful, but level 5 spells are where Pathfinder magic really starts to take off and become encounter breaking. Myself and the cleric both had access to spells of this level and power. And there were others I could have used to break the encounter all the same, Baleful Polymorph being one. So I cast the spell. Have the party subtly place the gem in line of sight of the enemies, but out of line of sight with them, so I didn't possess any of them accidentally, and started possessing the enemies. I succeeded on my first attempt, then tried to start a brawl, or otherwise get the enemies killing each other, and confused. The DM had no idea how to react, and immediately put the session on hold, basically saying, "What the hell is this spell?" And when I explained it and linked him the rules, he took one look at them and said, "Yeah, I'm banning that. No way." Obviously, this caused an issue. The group took offense that the DM was punishing the wizard for creative play, and for banning a spell that's in the core rulebook. That's not to say that core spells aren't overpowered, but if he banned Magic Jar, what else was he going to spot ban when we got to level 6 and 9 spells? Overall, it left a nasty taste in the party's mouth, but when we tried to make our case like reasonable adults, he straight up rage quit. Suffice to say, I'm disappointed. I don't understand DMs who get frustrated when their players win. Wizards are overpowered, but that's how high-level Pathfinder is. Anyone who's played level 9+ can likely attest to the fact that combat can end in one round if the casters play right and have the support of their party. This wasn't even a case of spotlight hogging, because the party thought it was amazing. I have used Magic Jar to incredible effect in games, where I've possessed big enemies to help turn the tide in large battles, and it's one of my favorite spells. There seemed to be a lot of sentiment that the party was at fault for not bowing to the DM's tantrum, and that we should have done X, Y, and Z differently. While I do understand tabletop is a cooperative game, where everyone's fun is important, it leaves a sour taste in my mouth that there are people who think players should have danced around DMs who can't conduct themselves with maturity. Player creativity should always be rewarded. This is something I've said in numerous horror stories. If a player has a really cool solution to your problem, at the very least you should let them try it. And if you're worried about your player's abilities being too powerful, then ramp up the encounters. Quit putting a higher CR version of the same 4 goblins in a square room. But if there's a situation where your players completely countered their enemy and outplayed them at every turn, just let them have it. What is the point of player planning if it doesn't actually end up affecting the game? That isn't saying to make it easy for them, but if they went out of their way to gather enough research to know exactly what to do, and they're able to pull it off without a hitch, bravo to them. So anyway, those are today's stories, and those are my thoughts, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, whether that's in the comments down below, or on the Crow's Perch Discord server. Oh, and I almost forgot, we hit 2K subs. Well, we're past that now, but still. And if you'd like to see more content from this channel, please consider subscribing. And a special thank you to the Crow's Perch patrons over on Patreon. Oh, but however would the channel go on if not for our burbs, Medolci, Procchioni, and Reuven Gritters? And of course, who could forget our Counts of Quills, Haley, Zerofang, and Netscape Navigator?
I say, where would we be without our Barons of Beaks, Anja, and McYeetly?
And of course, who could forget our Duke of Feathers, Acroth? Thank all of you for supporting the channel. And if you would like to become a patron yourself and become a member of the Burb aristocracy, then feel free to check out the Crow's Perch Patreon, link in the description down below. And with all of that out of the way, I'll see you next time as the crow flies.